Welcome to A Lunch with Biggie, a podcast about small business and creatives sharing their stories and inspiring you. My guest today has established himself as a prominent figure in the Miami food scene, especially when it comes to burgers and comfort food. You could say, or I'm going to say it, he's the original beast. Please welcome the burger beast, Sef Gonzalez. What's going on, man?
How's it going, dude? Good to see you.
Good to see you, man. It's been a long time for sure. Thanks for having a lunch break with me. I always like to ask the question, what's your go-to lunch? I'm going to go-to lunch, burger, sandwich. What's your usual go-to?
Well, today's Tuesday, so today would be tacos.
I like that.
So I did come back from a Taco Tuesday, yes.
Okay. Do you usually mix it up the course of the week?
Yes. Sometimes I don't have lunch to be quite honest, because I make myself breakfast. That's one thing that I do for sure. During that particular area, early 2020, that we don't like to discuss or even name.
Yeah.
I decided I was going to go back to old school. When I was a kid, I grew up with my grandparents and my parents, and I would be awakened in the morning by them making even coffee. So espresso in the morning, and that smell just like enveloped the entire house, and that forever reminds me of them. So when I really didn't have anything to do, April, May 2020, I decided I'm going to start making coffee like they used to make it early in the morning, 6:30. Been doing it now for 4 years. And so first thing I do, I wake up, I make coffee, have a café con leche, which always reminds me of them.
Oh, yeah.
So sometimes I do make breakfast also, which I made yesterday. In this case, I knew it was Taco Tuesday. I only had a café con leche, like a good Cuban boy. And then we went to a Mari Mix, which is one of our favorite spots in Miami for Taco Tuesday. Had 3 carnita tacos, and we shared some nachos.
Nice, man. That's delicious. Okay, so let's talk about Burger Beast. So you started it as a blog in 2008.
Mm-hmm.
Can you tell people a little bit about like the origin story, like what led you to want to start this, and then we can kind of start talking from there, because I feel like for you, like that kind of started a variety of different things from the time you started Burger Beast.
Yeah, it started with retail management misery. I was in retail management for a long time. Companies you would know probably, Best Buy, I worked at for about 5 years down here in Miami. I was a department supervisor of music, movies, video game software. Then I worked at Metro PCS, cell phone store manager. And during that period of time, I was probably reaching 12, 13 years of retail management. And I'd had enough. I got home one day, and I always say this, if it was like a Lifetime movie, my wife would have walked in on me in the bedroom, and I'm sitting at the edge of the bed and I'm crying. This is how I envisioned how it happened. Probably nothing like this. She saw I was kind of frustrated, and she's like, she wanted to give me some hobby, and why don't you just write about all the places you like to eat at and write about all the burgers you love? And that was right around February of 2008. Now, the blog doesn't happen till September. I was trying to rack my brain for a few weeks trying to figure out the name. And I wanted to call it Now That's a Tasty Burger, because I'm a giant Pulp Fiction fan. And that URL was taken. And I was, I figured if I can't have the URL, I didn't want it. And she suggested I call myself, well, not call myself, she said call the blog Burger Beast. And it was available. I bought it, and I sat on it for 6 months. And my uncle suggested to me that I go eat at some pizza place and get a meatball sub. He said, this place is really great. This is a pizza place I've been eating my entire life. And when I get there, they had like one of those little price bursts, like a special. And it says, I forgot. I forgot the name of the burger right now. It's the picture's on my blog. And they had a burger with, I think it was called the Swiss Alps burger, I want to say. And it was Swiss cheese with onions, grilled onions. They baked they baked the bread in house, so it was a baked hand pattied. Found that very odd that a pizza place would take the time to make that kind of thing. So I ordered it. I liked it. Pulled out my Motorola Razr, snapped a shot. One of the ugliest things you've ever seen in your life. If you look at these pictures, how flat they were. We had a digital camera, but that wasn't my plan. And I got home that night and went to Google, opened a blogger account as the Burger Beast. And Burger Beast I didn't refer to myself as the Burger Beast. That's just something that happened people would run into me and call me Beast or Hey Burger Beast, and like I guess that's what's it's meant to be. So that's what it is. I just thought that would be the name of the blog, not my personal,
Yeah.
nickname.
Wow. So what is your ideal burger?
Very simple. When we're in the Midwest and we do a lot of road trips, I think you know that,
Yeah.
and so the original kind of burgers have a variation of either diced onions, pickles, and yellow mustard. That for me is a perfect burger. Maybe add cheese. I'm not a fan of what I will call a burger with a pile of shit on it. Which seems to be a very popular thing, and I get a lot of pictures and videos for it. Like, have you seen this? And I'm like, yeah, I'd rather forget that exists.
Yeah.
There's some assumption that I would prefer that, and it's like everything I eat, even barbecue. I don't want sauce on it. I want you to give me the smoked meat so I can try it, and if it's really good, maybe I'll dip it in sauce. But I really like the base. Like my favorite ice cream is vanilla. My wife makes fun of me, and that's fine. You can keep making fun of me. My favorite cola is Coca Cola. Yes, I like
Okay.
all the basic stuff. I will try everything else, and seldom there's stuff that breaks through, like a patty melt, which is another thing that makes me lose my mind. And I do consider a burger a sandwich, since I know I'm here with you.
Yeah, I was gonna ask that question to you about that as well. So you started it in 2008. Where in this as I was researching and you and I were going back and forth, I know like obviously at what point did you decide to open a horror themed movie store, Oh the Horror? Like where does that fit into the
Well, that's
from
before.
the time
That's before. So that
so before you started, you were actually doing that before.
Yeah, I would probably say the first time I tried going and doing a business was in '97. There was a local punk rock band called 3240 that I was a fan of. They didn't have the money to put out a 7-inch, vinyl, a 45, as I'd call it. 7 inches is what it was called after. I don't even know what it's called now. And I financed it for them. I actually paid for it to get printed. Now they had already the recording, but I have a couple of copies of it, and I was able to put it out. To this day, I'm still friends with two of the guys in the band. And that was the first time I did something. I got the records. It was cool to hold it. I mean, it wasn't my band, but it was my friend's band. I would go to their
Yeah.
live shows. I'd have like a little thing selling, selling their merch if they had shirts, and I was there selling, hawking my little 7-inch record of 3240. Appetite for Instruction.
Oh,
It had,
nice. Okay.
had 3 tracks on it, and that was, I guess, my first taste. I was already at Best Buy when that happened, and I stuck it with Best Buy another 3 years before uh, Marcella and I, which is my wife, I should say that. I can just assume people know who I'm talking about. Uh, her and I started dating in '98, and by 2000, I wanted out of that retail life. And my grandfather was getting older; he had a print shop. Uh, my mom's dad, and he really couldn't drive himself. And my mom's like, "Why don't you take him to work, and maybe you can make some shop in the front?" So I took his print shop, kind of pushed everything back, and then built in the front 2/3 a horror themed movie store called Oh the Horror. Um, I think if I had footage, I wish I had filmed my family's face when I told them the name of what I was going to call this place. They It went over their head. They had no idea what I was trying to do. This is the same time Hot Topic is starting to gain some traction. And I
Okay.
remember having my store about a year in, and someone goes, "This place reminds me of Hot Topic," and I'm like, "I don't know what that is." At that point, I really didn't know what it was. I was
Yeah.
just it was a video rental and sales store, and we had merch, and I was buying posters from the UK and shirts from overseas and wherever I could get designs. Very cult horror film stuff. We did have some mainstream stuff for rent, but mostly the fans who came in there were the hardcore, and including, by the way, some very frightening customers that I would not like to be alone with in an alley. And I'm not.
What's your favorite horror movie?
I think that the thing that set it all in motion for me, and it's not really a horror movie, is Army of Darkness, right? In '90,
Okay.
that movie came out. and I just became enamored with Sam Raimi, the director, and with Bruce Campbell, and it made me
Yeah.
start digging back. Now, as a kid, my dad, I watched all the classics. So we're talking all the Universal monster stuff. So the Bela Lugosi, the Boris Karloff. As you can see behind me, there's part of a Bella head there, and you can see a creature from the Black Lagoon, like what would you call him, fin hanging
Yeah.
down, and you see the Boris Karloff back there. So my wife and I are big fans of that, and I watched all that stuff growing up. And again, going back to, I don't know, the Marx Brothers, the Three Stooges, Little Rascals, all that stuff. My dad uh, was the one who got me into that. To this day, I'm still a big fan of it, and I like horror films in particular that kind of have a new feel and an old feel. So they're inspired by the old school.
Yeah.
So if it's a
Well,
little too fancy and bright and shiny, I'm not really a fan of it.
I love that. I love that. So then, okay, so then once all that happens, how long did you have Oh the Horror for? How long were you
I did 2 years. I closed it in 2002. I went back to the retail management grind. I was at GameStop as a store manager, um, and then I started working for Metro PCS about 4 years later. And then I was at Metro PCS all through the beginning of Burger Beast. I left at the beginning of 2011 to do Burger Beast full time.
I was gonna say, what was the at what I guess so I know this is kind of two different layers because one is like, okay, I have some like I'm kind of always kind of curious, like at what point did you say, oh, I think I have something here, and then at what point was it that you said from there that you were like, okay, I think I'm ready to not do it full time, do Burger Beast full time.
It's okay. So I had just gotten my review. I would say this was late February of 2011. My yearly review, I got a great review. Not that I'm trying to show that off because it gets me nothing
Yeah,
right now, but it's important to say that because I got a raise, 5%, whatever. I don't remember specifically what it was. And my boss was well aware of the Burger Beast existence. I had already come out in the Miami Herald and the Sun Sentinel, the local papers down here. And at that point, I think I had already even done the first food truck event in Florida. Uh,
that's the one that you guys won Guinness World Book World Record
well,
is the
that was
largest.
after. That was in
Okay.
2013. This one was in 2010,
Okay.
September. That the Miami Herald hired me. They said we'd like for you to curate the food at this giant arts festival. And I was like, okay, how about I bring in the food trucks? The food trucks, there was maybe 10 of them here in Miami. Orlando was kind of was I'd say 6 to 8 months behind Miami.
Yep.
And that's how I met Mark, which I think is when I met you at one of Mark's events, right?
Yes.
Because Mark reached out to me because he didn't know what went into producing a food truck event, and at that point, I think maybe I had done 5 or 6, but I just talked to him and gave him whatever knowledge I had, and I went out for the first 2 events he did. I remember one was it in a church maybe,
I think it could have been a church parking lot
and the second
type
one
thing.
was in a mall parking lot. If I remember,
Yep.
that's
And
when I
he did quite a few in mall parking lots. That was like the kind of like the shtick that he ended up doing, like on a Sunday after the mall was closed. He
yes,
would take over the parking lot and do it that way. Yeah.
and that's the same day I also met Julius, the
Yes.
food blogger Julius, because he likes to be
Yes.
propped up. And I met Thomas Ward, who had
Yes.
who had at the time the Treehouse truck, and he was doing a Luther Burger, and he now owns in Orlando, of course, Big Floyd's and Pizza,
Yep. Yep.
and still friends with those guys. So that's how I met them. I met them at that event. Julius and I had been riding back and forth, and I physically met him that day. And then Thomas tried winning me over by giving me a box of Krispy Kreme donuts. Even though I like donuts, I did not want them, but he would not take no for an answer.
Uh, I could see that. I could totally
so,
see that.
so what
So then,
happened? So I'm sorry. Sorry.
no, that's
If
fine.
you talk to me, I will veer like 10 million.
No, no, no. I love this. I love this. I mean, because obviously we've known each other for years, so like I love hearing all these like the little tidbits. So that's great.
And so I tell my boss at Metro BCS, hey, I have no intentions to leave. I mean, I was monetizing at that point by doing events. That's really all I had. But I hadn't made more than maybe $100 in a month at that point. Obviously, you can't live off
Yeah.
$100 unless I move back with my parents. That's nowadays that might not be a bad idea, but and and so we're on a vacation to St. Augustine, Marcel and I, after the week after my review. And I always wake up before her, a couple hours before. I woke up, and by the time she woke up, I was sitting at the laptop. And she's like, "Oh, what are we doing for breakfast?" And the first thing I said to her, "When I get back, I'm giving my 2 weeks notice." And she's like, "Did you just tell them that you weren't leaving?" And I said, "Yes, I did, but I honestly believe that if I dedicate myself full time to this, I can figure out how to make it a go of this." And that's what I did. I mean, the first month I think I made $250, even though the previous month the most I've ever made 100. And it was one of those things that after working with the Miami Herald suggested to the Hard Rock Hotel, "Hey, you should reach out to this guy." And then the Miami Heat reached out to me, and then the Marlins reached out to me, and everyone started reaching out to me, the Seminole Tribe, and everyone was trying to hire me to produce events. And I went from not really having money coming in to I have a ton of events and probably not enough great food trucks to do this. And that's wherein the situation rises where as trucks started coming out, people were coming out not because they had great food, because they saw it as an opportunity to make money. And
Yeah.
I was kind of like the food police. So I would go try a truck wherever they were, and I would invite them to participate in my event if I thought the food was good. And that caused, you know, some of the first Burger Beast hate. The trucks that weren't happy that I was essentially policing, and I was like, at the end of the day, by this point, my blog's 3.5 years old, and I'm putting out an event, and it's a Burger Beast, as I would call it, Burger Beast approved food truck event, and it was important to me that all the food that was there was great. I was
Yeah.
not going to be one of these guys who produced an event and they had 3 shaved ice trucks and 2 corn on the cob trucks. It was not like that. It was meant like we had one burger truck, one taco truck, one ice cream truck, and that's what I set out to do. And I did the whole run of food truck events till 2020. I always did it that way.
Till 2020.
Yeah,
So for almost and so monthly for 20 till 2020.
I had a variety. The Hard Rock event we did for about 3 years. We did one with Magic City Casino for 8 years, and then Arts
Wow.
Park we did for almost 8 years, and then the pandemic happened in 2020, and
Yeah.
my contract expired, and they just never renewed it. And at that point, because everything got shut down, everything we were doing caused me to reevaluate what we were going to do. And that's
Yeah.
where, at that point, I had just ordered a pallet of guava sriracha ketchup sauce, which is a sauce I still sell and I put on my burgers. And I have a pallet, and I can't go anywhere because no restaurant's open. So,
Wow.
like, what do I do with this? And it became me pretty much telling people, "Hey, I can ship these sauces to you, and these are glass bottles." And it was a giant learning curve for us to go from producing events, which is what our main income, to all of a
Yeah.
sudden trying to sell items, which is what I know you specialize in. And it's not the same thing, and I don't think people realize that. It's a totally
No.
different animal. And then we started doing boxes, like the Burger Beast box, where I would
Yeah.
go with my wife, she'd get off, she'd wear the mask. No one wanted to go anywhere. I would get from a meat purveyor 8 half-pound burgers, and I would get Tillamook cheese, who worked with us, and Martin's potato rolls. And the box allowed you in a bottle of my guava sriracha ketchup, and you can make these things at home. We would deliver it to your house. And we drove all the way from Palm Beach all the way down to Homestead. You're talking, it would take us
Really.
3 days of deliveries. Yeah, it was a lot of work, but we were home. And at this point, we're like, this is way better than staying home. It's not like we were
Yeah.
making money hand over fist, but it was a good boost of income when we really didn't have any money coming in,
Yeah.
and, then you start trying to figure out, I don't know if you want to keep going down this path, but where like everyone starts asking as things are kind of clearing up a little, like, what are you going to do for your events? When are you going to finally bring back an event? And by
Yeah.
that December, I wanted to do Croqueta Palooza, but no one was going to allow us to do an indoor event with 1,000 people. So I said, let's do a variation of these boxes. So Magic City Casino let us set up tents outside in an enclosed lot in their valet lot, and we had restaurants per tent, right? Like there was next to each other. They were, I think, 10 to 15 feet away from each other, and we did a Croqueta Palooza box. And so we got there earlier. We assembled. You get a 6-pack of Matedva and Jupiña. Of course, those 6 packs don't exist. I had to
Yeah.
buy the individual ones. pop off six. I did that with my dad, and we sat in my old burger museum and put them back together so it would be three and three. And the box was really meant for six people. So, and then there was like five different restaurants doing croquetas, chiefless plantain chips, night owl cookies, bread man pastelitos, all the stuff you really couldn't get or would be difficult to get because everyone was so
Yeah, it was
quarantined.
closed.
Everyone drove up. I was with my goddaughter and her boyfriend at the entrance wearing masks, checked you in. You got into a line, you went, and we gave you your box in a bag, and you went home and you were able to have, and we did go get the Palooza that way.
All right, so let's rewind because there's a few things that kind of go into. I have like a lot of questions on
All
some
right.
of these things. So the first part is, um, how like how impressive is it? And okay, so first we'll go with like you obviously one of the things that I think is remarkable, and I'll admit like for me like I everything that you've created for like in the world of yes in my world I think the sandwich and the burger are like cousins.
Right.
I don't think they're the same thing, but at the end of the day, I will say
I'm ready.
what
I'm ready.
you've what you've created, like I've always been inspired of what you've done and what the name that you and what you've created because the one thing that like obviously and we'll get there when as we're going through this journey is the fact that you basically have a passion for burgers and through that you basically shared and the beauty of what I think that I love about you is that you show love to burger like I don't care if it's fast food, I don't care if it's mom and pop, it's like I'm basically if it's good food I want to tell you about it, and by the way if he tells you if he makes a recommendation like if he says, "Hey, get the burger and an English muffin,"
Mhm.
you listen to whatever he tells you to do. I will tell you that right now. He knows his stuff. And so because of that, I've always been inspired when I started Deli Fresh Threads because in my world I've always been like I'd love to get to that point where I'm like I'm becoming like the sandwich guy as he is the burger beast. I'm like, because you've created, one of the first things that you did, which I thought was very smart, as you started doing the blogs, you also created like your little Burger Beast approved sticker, which kind of goes in hand with the fact that you now, you give those places, you give those stickers out to places you appreciate. But then at the same time, you also then kind of created when you marketed your events, you did it as Burger Beast approved, which people then go, "Whoa, I trust him. He makes good food. I know it's going to be. We're going to eat tons of crazy food. That's going to be delicious." So I think like I truly admire the fact that like what you've kind of created, but I also love the fact that you've like you kind of built from, not only it was like, okay, I started from the website, but then I started doing events. And then those events led to things like, like what made you want to create Croqueta Palooza? Because you did that in 20, I believe you started that in 2014 is when you did your first Croqueta Palooza. So first tell people what a croqueta is,
Mhm.
and then two, give people an idea of like what triggered that to actually become something that people were like, yeah, I'm gonna have all these people come make croquetas.
So I grew up eating croquetas. That's a Cuban, the Cuban snack food. It's not
Yes.
originally a Cuban dish. It's actually a French dish. Generally, it's made with meat, some sort of meat like ham, some bechamel. It's breaded. Most of the French croquettes, as they're referred to, are
Hmm.
generally round, right? The Cuban ones are like more like cylinder.
Yeah.
They're like half a hot dog, I would say.
Almost like a pill or oblong. Yeah, it's like a hot dog.
Yeah, yeah, or as we call it, some of us call it meat sticks. So,
Uh-huh.
I mean, that could refer to something else, but we're talking about croquetas here,
Yeah, yeah,
and
yeah.
so I, when I started the blog, even more so, even if we went to Orlando, anywhere I went, there wasn't a big burger culture. Burger is a
Mhm.
very cyclical thing. Certain towns are better than others. If you go to the Midwest, the burger culture is everywhere. Original, we're talking places that were in the 20s, 30s, 40s, 50s, still around. Miami's not one of those towns. Miami is still relatively, I guess, we just say, young town. It's 100 and some years. I think it is. I don't even know why I'm saying that because I don't even know. But they don't. It's not like you ever go to Miami. Man, Miami's a burger town. Like Miami is like
Yeah.
a fusion town. There's every pretty ethnicity of any food you're looking for is down here, and the best
Yeah.
version of it.
Yeah.
And so growing up, I ate croquetas as a kid. My mother would pack my lunchbox in elementary school with croquettes. and those things are fried, and you put something fried in a lunchbox for 3 or 4 hours, and when you open it, it doesn't necessarily smell great. And I would sit in the I'm a 5 or 6 year old kid opening my lunchbox, and everyone's like, "What the hell is that smell?" But so eventually, people asked me, "Can I try this?" And then they would try it, and they're like, when I'd have it, they wanted to trade with me, and I was like, "No, no way, I'm not a trainer with it." But when, like I was saying, when I started the blog, there wasn't a lot of burger joints for me to write about. I mean, I
Yeah.
started going into, talking about chains, and not that there's, like I said, anything wrong. If they're a great chain, they're a great chain.
Yeah.
But I found myself that there was a handful of burger joints I could talk about, and it forced me to start writing about other comfort food, which is why it became a blog about comfort food and not just about burgers. And
Mhm.
croquettes was one of the first things that people's ears perked up when I wrote about it. Even to this day, most of the media here covers South Beach, Wynwood, Brickell, downtown. I live in the suburbs. Guess what? I'm the anti media down here. I do not go to those areas. I just went to Wynwood twice in the last month. I think I've been years since before that, since I have been to Wynwood. I just don't go. I just cover the places in the suburbs that have the comfort food that I like, and that's what the blog's all about, right?
Yeah.
And so I wrote about croquetas, and people were excited. And then I wrote about frita cubana, which is the Cuban burger. It was a street food in Cuba.
Yep.
And I realized, hey, I got something here. I started writing about chicken tenders, and I realized like all that stuff in the sphere of comfort food and stuff that you find, you do find in fast food places, but there are fast food places that execute it very well. And I
Yeah.
was like, this is what I should be writing about, and this is ultimately really what I know about. It wasn't like I was doing a put on where I was pretending I knew about things. I actually knew which ones were good.
Yeah.
And with that, it made me meet a bunch of other people who are into the same thing. And to this day, I have people who write me all the time. And and you'll see me shout out, "Hey, I went to this place because so and so suggested to me." And they're like, "Hey, I know what you like. You got to go try this." And that's how sometimes I find spots around town. But
Yeah.
if it wasn't for that, I wouldn't have done Croqueta Palooza. And we did Free Showdown because it was going to be a smaller event. It was about 150 people. It was the first ticketed event we did. I was very nervous because I thought, I don't think I can sell 150 tickets. I didn't know what we were capable of. Yes, at that point, we have been around, a considerable amount of time. But we had not done a ticketed event. It's a totally different animal where a free admission, you come in and spend money. And we do the Free Showdown. We were very lucky, especially the first 10 years that we had a partnership with Magic City Casino. And the COO of the casino, Scott Saban, when I would tell him, "Hey, I have this idea," he's like, "Let's do it." And he was 100% behind any of our ideas. As you can tell, some of the stuff I did, you're like, who would have allowed him to do, a chicken tender event, a hot dog event called Wiener Bash that was headlined by Vince Neil, Molly Crew. Even when I pitched him, "Hey, I have an idea for a burger museum," he's like, "I have a space that you could use." And I was very lucky that yes, we were creative, but we had a partner that was helping us, giving us the opportunity. It was a lot of work, and but getting back to Croqueta Palooza, it started as Free to Showdown. We did a very small event, 150 people. It did not do very well the first time. I think we lost somewhere in upwards $3,000 to $4,000. I was committed to making it work. It wasn't until the third event that we the second event we broke even, so we were still down money technically if you want to think in those
Yeah.
terms. It wasn't until the third event that we made enough money that put us back at zero. From By the time the third event rolled around, I already had the idea to do Croqueta Palooza, and I said, I think I'm just going to jump into Croqueta Paloozas because when I started the blog, croquetas weren't like now down here in Miami that everyone's so enamored and it's a public infatuation. It wasn't really like that, and people maybe don't understand that. Now it's a no-brainer. Hey, you're going to do a Vada Croqueta? Of course, why wouldn't you? Back then,
Yeah.
I remember telling Nadal, who founded Pincho Factory, and I told him, hey, I think my next event's going to be, Croqueta Palooza, and I'm going to jump from 150 to 1,000 people. And he told me, dude, you're crazy. You're going to lose all your money. And I said, am I? Am I really crazy? So we do the first event, and we only sold like 40% of the tickets. But we did not lose money, which is a plus.
Yeah.
uh, but everyone was so excited, and there was a buzz in the air. People were excited because something like an event revolving around the Cuban finger food was a very odd thing to even attempt. With 30 vendors between beer, wine, liquor, snacks. We had Rey La Fritas doing fritas. It was just and I had someone from the local newscast as one of the. We also had a fantastic. I did a flan competition. I had fireman Derek. This is before he even had his 3 or 4 locations, and we had someone from the news, and we had a pastry chef as a judge, and people were like, how is this happening? It's such a bunch of people from different worlds all thrown together, and it was just people I was lucky enough to meet over the years that I said, hey, I'm planning to do this. Do you want to be involved? And we did it, and then people started asking, when is the next one? And by the third one, we were off, man. It was People were excited. They were asking me who was participating. I had restaurants asking me how can I be a part of the event, just very much like the food truck event. You want me to try your croqueta? There was these guys who were doing croqueta pop-ups. They were from Miami in Houston, and they were in town, and they wanted to participate in croqueta palooza. And I said, I can't let you in unless I try your croqueta. I can't take the chance you're going to put something in
Yeah.
there that's not good. They fried them at their mother's house, came to my parents' house and met me, and that's where I tried the croquetas. I told them yes, and they actually won croqueta palooza that year.
Oh wow.
Yeah, yeah. So it's just some of the wackier stuff that's happened.
What so so one I guess definitely one of the things that definitely helps is the fact that you had Magic City. So like and I'm assuming Magic you created that relationship because of the food trucks. So basically they kind of said, "Hey, look, Steph knows what he's talking about. We're going to, whatever your ideas are." Because I mean, that's always kind of like a huge one to be able to kind of figure out like how am I going to make I have this idea, I want to make it into something and where can I do it? And to be able to have those partners because of creating, just those relationships that you've had built with them. And then you built that and you kind of did that. And then at the same time, you also were doing, I know as you were doing Croqueta Paloozas and all those, you also kind of started doing, at what point were you starting to do your own like pop ups? And you even had like a burger mobile, and I know like you started doing like your own pop ups. And then I know like, as we start moving more forward, that's when you kind of started what idea gave you to kind of do the condiments like the sauces like the guava sriracha ketchup, which is delicious. I know you started that in 2017. Like kind of how did that kind of go? Was that did someone come and approach to you, or you're like, you know what, I should kind of come up with my own thing when I'm making burgers? How did that kind of go?
Well, I had the Burger Museum, which we haven't discussed, and that was again.
Yep.
So
And that's in 29. Is that when does the Burger Beast Museum open?
December of 2016. So Magic
Okay.
City Casino is another thing. We used to have a small office. We used to meet with them every year to decide. My office was just covered in burger memorabilia. On my blog, you can find pictures of what the office looked like, and there's a couple, I think, walkthroughs on YouTube who people filmed walking around my office, and they're like, "This is like a burger museum." So when I met with the casino folks, they're like, "This is absolutely incredible." I go, "Yeah." I told them, joking, "Can you imagine if I had a museum to put this into?" And they're like, "We can talk about that." And I never in a million years thought it was going to happen. That was a major undertaking.
Yeah.
It was
Didn't you have like 2,000 pieces or something like that? Isn't there like
well,
2,000
I
pieces of memorabilia?
probably at its peak I had over 4,000. There was well over 1,000 that were not even on display. I just
Wow.
got out of control. I literally got out of control. People were donating stuff. I made it a point to put the donated items on display, and because I felt like they donated, they want to see their stuff there. We rotated some stuff, and the museum there was like I think at the end of the day there was like 5 versions. The initial version, then I said we should add an ice cream shop. They gave us the casino gave us more space. We opened an ice cream shop on the front. That did not work out financially, and it was at that time I started doing the burgers in 2017. And the first burger was pickle mustard onion, diced onion, and by the second event, and it was April 1st, 2017. And by the second event, which was 2 weeks late, I think it was April 22nd, was so 3 weeks, I had a guava sriracha ketchup sauce. And that came about because I was trying to create, there was a burger chain, but it was based out of Central Florida called Biff Burger. The last one was in Tampa. It shut down maybe 4 or 5 years ago. I'd found the recipe online. It was like a barbecue ketchup. Had a long list of ingredients. I decided one day, hey, I'm going to try recreating this at home. I realized I probably don't have half the ingredients. So I just started writing down everything that I had, and I ended up with a guava sriracha ketchup. I was like, well, this ingredient is kind of like this ingredient, and that's how it ended up. There was a lot more ingredients, so it's a little more simple, the recipe now. But I probably say there was 12 items, including, putting it over the stove on low, stirring, and then adding something. One of the things I remember it had was jalapeno juice. I used to work at a movie theater when I was in high school, and the the nachos used to come with nacho cheese. But
Mhm.
our theater, they would open the giant canister of jalapenos and have us pour the liquid from the jalapenos into the nacho cheese and stir it so it had jalapeno flavor. And so I always said I would love to use that for something. And so the original guava sriracha ketchup had the jalapeno. So that's how the sauce came about. And the sauce existed for, I'd say, 2.5 years before I decided I'm going to bottle it, not knowing the pandemic is right around the corner.
Yeah.
By the time it arrives, I think it was 1 or 2 weeks before everything got shut down. And then, like I said,
Wow.
I got stuck with. Well, I didn't get
Pallets
stuck.
and pallets.
That's it. It just every time something happens, it causes me to get creative and figure out, like, all right, how do I do this? How do I?
No, and I think that's the great thing about what you've done is, like you said, anytime something kind of happens, you figure out like, okay, what can I do that stays within like your universe, but at the same time that kind of fits because it all does fit together as you kind of look at it. All the little pieces have all fallen into place. As you start looking through what you've created and what you've done, didn't you have another one besides the sriracha ketchup? Didn't you have like a mustard or
I had a honey mustard curry.
yes, that's the other one
The
that we
problem is
had.
the
Yes,
bottler could not get it to taste the way it was supposed to. And what happens with a lot of these sauces, they add preservatives, which is, kind of understood unless you're selling
yep.
small batch. I tried selling a few years ago, not a few years ago, maybe 6 months ago. I tried selling bottled versions. Like, I bottled it at the event. I said, hey,
Mhm.
pre-order, you can get the honey mustard curry. And people bought it and like, this doesn't taste the same. I go, I know, because this is what the real one tastes like. Like, the bottled one had some preservative that made it taste like what it tasted like. And I was almost like, you prefer the other one? I was like, I'm thinking the whole time, this one is way better. They're, but yeah, I did. I do have a green serrano hot sauce, which is also under. It was early launch as Burger Beast. I had all three at one point, and then when I started doing the Cruz Diablo stuff last year, I changed the green serrano hot sauce to Cruz Diablo. So the guava sriracha ketchup is Burger Beast. The green serrano is Cruz Diablo, and the guava sriracha ketchup, as my friend from Empanada Harry says, stop tinkering with your label. I think I changed the label like 5 times, and I'm planning to change it again because I'm going to change it to say guayaba instead of guava.
Oh, okay. I like that.
I,
I like that.
I feel like
What
it should say guayaba.
so then and one of the other things, so obviously these are all things that have occurred and you've kind of gone through as you've done everything from like the pop-ups, because then the cool thing is I'm assuming then as you were doing the burger museum and you were selling burgers, people were like, man, these burgers are good, and then that kind of led for you to then start doing pop-ups around different places and just going around once the museum closed.
I was doing it while the museum was open. So
Okay.
I did at our Betters Hot Dogs, which is open since 1959, and this year they turned 65. Congrats to them, of course. I'm friends with them. I asked them, hey, would you let me do burgers here? And they're like, yeah. Did not know what to expect. I think we had maybe 100 burgers prepped. I was like, there's no way in the world we're going to sell 100 burgers. Well, I was wrong. There was a line out the door to the sidewalk down to the house because our Betters is on the corner, but there's homes next to it, and the line went to the home next door. I remember looking outside, and my first thought it was like, oh my god, there's not enough food. I never want to disappoint people. I
Yeah.
go talk to David Arbetter, and I was like, look, because I was inside talking to everybody, and I was like, I think you're going to have to go out there and kind of prepare people that for the fact they might not get a burger. I don't want them to wait in line an hour, hour and a half, get to the front of the line and not have a burger. I'd rather they be prepared for the possibility of that happening. And he went out and he talked to everybody. And Some people left the line, but guess what? Because those people left the line, everyone in line did get a burger.
That's
So
awesome.
the hot dogs were still available, his chili dogs, his fries, so his burgers, and we've since done a couple of pop ups there. I've done it when I did the round two of my pop ups back then. I did Breadman Bakery. I did Amati Mix, which is the place I had the tacos today. We did Union Beer, who had a nice run, and they just closed last weekend. A beer store down in Little Havana. Tio Colo, Bocadito Helado, the ice cream and pizza Cuban ice cream place. I did those, and then I said, "What am I doing? It's a lot of work to lug this equipment." This is before there was, like pop ups.
Yeah.
A lot of pop ups everywhere. Other than myself, there was maybe two other people doing pop ups, like what I was doing, going from place to place. And I went to refocus back on on the on doing the events, and then my 45th birthday. I'm friends with the owner of Mojo Donuts down here in Westchester, and him and I have been friends since we were 10 years old. And he's like, "Man, I hadn't done the burgers I think in a year and a half, 2 years." And he's like, "You should bring them back. Let's do them for your birthday." And we did them. At that point, he was about to open an ice cream shop inside the donut shop. He had a falling out with the guy he was going to open, and he said to me, "Why don't we just put your burgers in here instead?" That was mid summer 2019. We did a series of about 8 pop-ups, 8 Saturdays in a row. By the time the city came and we talked about the possibility of the grease trap and all the permitting,
Yeah.
it was going to cost us over $100,000 to just retrofit everything to be able to do it. And I said, "Look, this is not worth it because I can find a place and make it exactly how I want
Yeah.
than doing a shared kitchen." And I told him, in the long run, you have a sweet kitchen. Do you really want it to smell like burger grease where you're
Yeah.
making donuts? And I started looking for spaces. It was at this time I set out and started making the sauces. This is the end of 2019, and I was looking for locations. And what put a stop to that? The same thing that put a stop to everything at the beginning of 2020.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But one thing that you also, I mean, if you think about it, that year you did quite a bit because the other thing that you did was also right in 2019. You wrote the book all about the burger. It's like, which is a history book about burgers and how it became famous. Like, where did that idea come from? I mean, obviously everyone knew that you had a love for it, but like, where did you're like, you know what? I'm going to write about this because I'm into this. I mean, it also probably helped quite a bit that you had the museum, so then you kind of grabbed even more information and then decided to kind of create and build from there.
The book was actually written in 2018. The book came out in April 2019. I remember I had to submit it by the second week of December. They told me, "We need you to turn it in before we go on vacation," the publishing company. And I turn it in, and they're like, "Oh, that's fine. We didn't really need it to January." So I'm like, "Why'd they tell me the second week?" And at that point, I had unearthed a bunch of new information about the Cuban burger, the frita. And I said, "The frita is kind of mentioned in passing in the original version of the book." And I said, I go, "How much time would you give me if I just make a whole frita chapter?" And they're like, "Well, if you can get it, I think it was the first week of January, you can get it in." And I wrote I added that chapter to the book because I had the opportunity to. As
Yeah.
far as the book, yes, the publishing company reached out to me about doing a book, and they told me what or topics you would like to write about. And of course, the logical one is the history of burgers, but that's actually not the one I wanted to write. I wanted to
Okay.
write one that was actually called "My Life in the Miami Food Truck Scene," and it was about doing the events and the characters that I encountered and the most unbelievable stories of things that happened and I witnessed. I thought it was a better book, in my opinion, that could be written, and they wanted me to do the burger book because I had the museum.
Yeah.
So that's how all about the burger happened.
What I so I mean dude, that's pretty amazing what you've been able to what you've created, and based on what you've created, the reputation that you've gotten, that people are coming to you to be able to kind of have, what you've created. Can you tell me a little bit of what you think has been your recipe for success?
I don't sleep. I, honestly, I think my main problem is I can't turn my brain off. So my brain is constantly thinking, "Oh, I could have done this better this way," or even for anyone in the industry down here who knows me, will probably tell you I pitched them an idea, and I'm not looking for money from them. I just told them, hey, you know what would be cool if you did? And there's a bunch of businesses in town that will tell you this was his idea. And I'm not looking for anyone to give me credit or anything. I don't need to repeat them.
Yeah.
But the guys, I don't know if you ever heard Pedro Let Me Tell You podcast.
Uh-huh.
It's a podcast down here about, and I became friends with them. And Darian cooks, and one day he invited Marcel and I over for chicken wings, and I was like, dude, why aren't you selling these chicken wings? And he's like, oh, they're kind of like someone you gotta like not push off the edge. And I said, come on, you guys don't want to do it. So what did I do? I called Union Beer, which was like who allows a lot of pop ups. I called the owner and I go, hey, I have some people. They're going to be doing chicken wings. Give me a date, and I'm going to go back and tell them. And I called, but let me tell you, and I was like, guess what? Your first date is this date, so you better be ready. And that's
That's
actually
amazing though.
how.
No, I love that though, because I think that, that's something that I think is just so fantastic that you actually I love coming up with ideas and being able to share and just kind of do it. But the fact that you kind of help instigate and kind of push those things, I think that is amazing. And I think that's it kind of makes sense why things kind of start falling little by little in place, because you're kind of, based on how you're, what you put into it is what you're getting back out. Even though you may not do it for the recognition, you do it just because your brain, that's kind of how your brain goes.
Right.
Always thinking of ideas, which I think is I think that's fantastic, man. I think I love it. What would you say has been what's been the like probably one of your favorite things that you've gotten out of this since you've started in 2008 in doing all this stuff with Burger Beast and everything that's come from it? What do you think? Is there something that you kind of like has been like, wow, this is like one of my things that I can't believe I've done and I've created or built or I've experienced or done?
I am very proud of the relationships I've made. In particular, this is important. My dad's, I'm sorry, my mom's dad, Goyo, who was, I always refer to him as the palate of our family. He's the one who would always say, once a week we would go out and eat together as a family, my grandparents, my parents, my sister, and I. And he always pretty much called the shots, where we went. And for me, 30, 40 years, he passed 20 years ago. But for me, all these years later, I'm friends with a lot of those families. And I even got choked up thinking about it. It's super
Yeah.
cool.
That's awesome, man. I love the relationships that you've created and that you've done. I love the fact that you're sharing these things with so many people. And I think, what's amazing is also the fact that like this all kind of pretty much started as a blog, and it's amazing how you've been able to adapt in time and change and be able to, talk about being adaptive to being able to kind of go with the ebbs and flows, everything from pandemic, hey, this didn't work out. It now led me to this. And a lot of people kind of, would have just stopped and said, no, I'm done. I'm not doing anymore. But you haven't. Is that just something that you just that's kind of built in your head, or is that like because not everyone's built that way?
Well, it goes back to Oh the Horror, actually. Oh the Horror was open for 2 years. It didn't really get any of the traction I wanted. It was very incredibly frustrating to have a store that I thought was very cool, and Marcel and I had poured our hearts into, and we still have relationships. I don't know if you've ever heard of Masa Craft, who's down here, and they're killing it. They're doing like Cuban, Filipino food, and Naira, who's the wife partner of of the couple, she used to shop at Oh the Horror. That's how we know her. So it's cool that we still have some relationship. But Oh the Horror, when I closed it, I felt instant regret. I was like, I felt like I never gave it the shot to succeed. And so when the Burger Bee started, and I started, and I'm not gonna lie, there's been times I've been wanting to just throw in the towel. I
Yeah.
said, I think back to Oh the Horror and say, nope, nope, I am not. I'm going to take this to the end. So, what is the end? Who knows? But it's going to keep going until I can't anymore. It just
Yeah.
like as you mentioned, it just keeps evolving. The stuff I do is just evolving. A lot of times, like and credit to my wife, because I tell her all these crazy ideas, and she's like, "Let's do it." And some of them she doesn't agree with. So
and I was going to ask about that because like I think that's such an important storyline all throughout all of this. Marcel always played a factor into this, in the fact of like being that supportive person and having that supportive circle. Because I'm pretty sure, even though for a majority of the time she's probably was on, just like how your family probably reacted originally with like when you said, "Oh, I'm gonna do a horror store," they probably like what like a lot of people probably also thought the same thing when you said, "Oh, I'm gonna do croqueta palooza," or "I'm gonna do this," or "I'm gonna do that." And I think it's so important to be able to have someone like that that kind of understands and basically helps harness that and kind of pushes it, because I'm assuming she's also pushed you in many ways as well to kind of be like, no, you can do this, you're going to do this, because we all have those moments of doubt during our journey.
It's funny you bring that up. One of my favorite stories to say is about my uncle. This is when I had an app. When it was a big deal that you had an app,
Hmm.
not now. And we did a giant event with food trucks. I even had, I forget who it was that came down from Tampa, and we did it at Tamiami Park over here, which is where they do the Dade County Youth Fair. It's a giant festival that happens every year. And I think we had, I honestly think we had more trucks at that event than when I set the Guinness World Record a few months later, which is what's really funny. And
Oh, wow.
so my uncle was going to the event. My uncle did not understand anything about Burger Beast. He went to eat at a restaurant on the beach called Burger and Beer Joint, and he calls me. He's like, never forget, I'm going to do a bad impersonation. He goes, "You're not going to believe this shit. They have a sticker on the door with your name." I'm like, "Yeah, yeah, like you gave it to them?" And I'm like, "Yeah, I gave it to them." "And they put it up?" And I'm like, "Yeah." And he was flabbergasted, and he could not make sense of the fact that I gave someone a sticker that said approved, and this restaurant that he goes to eat thought enough of me to put it on the door. And so when we had that event, there was a line to get into the parking lot of the park. And he calls my mom, who's sitting next to me, and he goes, "What in the hell is going inside?" He goes, "I can't get to Seth's event because there's a giant line." And my mom's like, "No, that line is for your nephew's event." And when he finally came out and saw the event, then he understood. You know,
Yeah. No, man, that's fantastic. I absolutely love it. I'll take this. If you ever, by the way, if you ever have any advice or any ideas that you want to give me, I'll gladly take it. I'll take any push I can get, because this is you truly inspire me, and I've always been inspired by you and everything that you do. So that was one of the reasons why I wanted to kind of have you on. One, to tell you, and two, just
thank
because I wanted to hear more of your stories, man. I've always loved everything that you've done and what you shared, and I always kind of look at it as that, as like I've always kind of seen you as someone. I'm like, man, I'm like, I really like, I just love how you've gone with the ideas that you have and actually have gone and made something of it. Because I've had numerous times where I've been like, oh, it'd be really cool to have a sandwich event in Orlando, but then I'm like, how would I coordinate that, and or things like that, and then I just don't, because I'm like, oh, it's just me. I'm like, I don't have the time to this. I got too many other things I'm doing, and then I just kind of stop.
but
But so I truly get inspired when I hear that.
but you have someone like me you can contact, and I can help you.
For sure. And I may have a conversation. We may have to have some more conversations, because I would love to pick your mind on when it comes to stuff like that. Um what have I missed anything? Any major things that I missed that you've done? I mean, I know obviously you had, like Guinness Book of World Records. You were one of the first ones with having to do with food trucks.
First one,
Um
first one.
the very first
Because
one,
I've
which
never
is
even tried breaking my. I was like the guy in Tampa started. Jeremy broke my record, and then he broke it over and over many times. And he kept telling me, "Hey, let's do an event together. Let's break and leave it like you and I doing it together." And I was like, "Look, I appreciate it. The Guinness World Record was my idea. When I pitched it to someone down here, we were going to go with it. They didn't go with it. I talked to Magic City Casino. They were all about it. And to be honest, if Magic City Casino hadn't said yes, it wouldn't have happened because we had to pay, an adjudicator to come out from Guinness who was actually counting the trucks. It was a big thing.
yeah.
And they paid for it, and we set the Guinness World Record. So I don't have a reason to break it. We're the first one. It was my idea. We set the record. You can break it 100 times over. There's always only
Yeah.
the first.
You're OG.
I'm always the first one who did it, so and I'm okay with
No.
that.
What advice would you have someone for wanting to start something?
Research. But at some point, you got to jump in, right? There's some point where it's like too much research and you're just doing excuses. And the
Yeah.
pedal, let me tell you guys, is a perfect excuse. Like, perfect example. They were ready. They knew what they were doing with the food. They were just a little timid about doing it. And I kind of had to pull the band aid for them and be like, guys, you're doing this event whether you like it or not. You know, El Rey de las Fritas, which is, the best known Cuban burger down here in Miami,
Yep.
their daughter started baking goods. And they're like, oh, she's a little timid. And I'm like, come on under my wing. We brought her. We did the Burger Club. We've been doing that for a couple of years. We're randomly doing events, and we had her come out, and she did events with us to help get her name out there. And if it's someone, you know, unfortunately, the current food media world, and I'm not talking about like newspapers. I'm talking all revolves around making money on stuff, and that's not what mine was built on.
Yeah.
It was building the community, right? So yes, the money will come, but you gotta have a community behind you that supports what you're doing, and that's important to remember. Hopefully, that doesn't get forgotten whenever I hang my spatula up.
No, man, I love that, and it's very true. I sometimes some people will ask me like, "Well, why didn't you do this? And why didn't you make money off of this?" And I was like, "I'm just trying to build. I'm just literally trying to build a sandwich community. Like that's literally what I want to be able to create and be able to help another small business and things like that. So I truly appreciate and love that. Where can people follow you? How can people, what socials? I'm going to put a lot of this stuff in our show notes as well, but where can a lot of people go and follow you online and social as they're listening to this and maybe they're scrolling on their phones? Where can they go and follow the Burger Beast?
You can follow me at Burger Beast pretty much everywhere. YouTube. I am on TikTok. Don't really use it. On YouTube, Instagram, Facebook, Twitter, Threads. I'm even in Pinterest. I don't know what I'm doing in there, but I am doing some things.
Yeah, no.
And also, and at the Cruz Diablo, which we didn't really talk about, which is my current burger pop-ups named after my dad's dad, who was a professional wrestler.
Okay, so let's do a quick talk about that just real quick. Like so, because it's funny because you mentioned that and I was like, oh, how am I going to bring that up? So now you can talk about. So how did that reiteration and then are when you're doing the pop ups, tell people a little bit about that and what they can expect at those pop ups.
So I told you I'd done the pop-ups on and off for a while. I had
Mm-hmm.
stopped. Ted's Burgers, who ended up winning Burger Bash, um, was someone who I connected with at Jay Wakefield, and that's where he made his name. Which again, another thing I'm very very proud of, connecting a talented person with a space that could harness what he was creating. And he was asking me, when are we going to do something? When are we going to do a pop up together? And I was like, dude, I don't do pop ups anymore. And he's like, no, let's do one. And we did it. It was absolutely crazy. And then we started going under the names the Burger Broskies, right? Like him and I, we were doing a burger. Initially, we were doing his burger, my burger. Then we started doing a combo burger, which was our creation. And then that went on hiatus. And I said, I've been doing the Burger Beast off and on at this point for 6 years. I was like, I'd rather resuscitate it and bring it back as something totally new. I had it in the back of my head, this idea to use my grandfather's professional wrestling name. He wrestled in Mexico and Venezuela and Cuba under a mask named the Cruz Diablo. And and that's what it was. I redid the burger. The beef blend is from an old Walgreens 1940s uh, cookbook, and I gave it to my meat purveyor Sunshine, and they recreated that beef blend for me. It's the same one Walgreens used to use in the 1940s. We switched a bun to sesame seed. We used the thicker American cheese, and then I created a new sauce that is not spicy. It's spicy-ish, and
Okay.
and that's what it has: crispy onions and crispy jalapenos. It's not spicy. It has just a little bit of a bite, the right amount of bite, and it's named after my grandfather. And then I wanted to name something after my dad, so I added the guava sriracha ketchup to the Cruciable, and that one's called El Hijo de Cruciable, which is the son of Cruciable. And then the
I
burger
love
piece
it.
is on there, so all three of us have a burger. Yeah,
That's awesome.
yeah.
Very, very cool, man. Thank Seth. Thank you so much for being on. I really appreciate you taking the time to chat with me. That's our show for today. Definitely make sure to check out Seth Gonzalez from Burger Beast online. Definitely phenomenal times to be able to listen to half the stuff. Definitely check out his social, check out some of the stuff like his paraphernalia when it comes to burgers. If you're ever traveling, just kind of go in there and look. If you're in South Florida, for sure ask him if you're anything. If you send him a message, he usually will respond and give you a great recommendation. He's done that for me numerous times. If you enjoyed the show, make sure to subscribe. If you want to support me, check out my brand, Deli Fresh Threads. Do some shopping and tell your friends. Thank you. Until next time, keep eating sandwiches and follow your passion. Thanks, everyone.
Thank